Why was Britain the cradle of the Industrial Revolution? My name's Abby Turner and I'm going to talk to you about the Industrial Revolution and some of the possible reasoning behind why Britain was the foundation of this world-changing event in history. But first, let's talk about what the Industrial Revolution was. The definition of the Industrial Revolution in the Oxford English Dictionary is Industrial Revolution, a rapid development in industry, the development which took place in England in the late 18th century and early 19th centuries, chiefly owing to the introduction of new or improved machinery and large-scale production methods. Or from the Academic Press Dictionary of Science and Technology, Industrial Revolution, the vast social and economic changes that resulted from the development of steam-powered machinery and mass production methods, beginning in the late 18th century in Great Britain and extending through the 19th century elsewhere in the world. So in simple terms, it was a transition to new machinery and technology. Going from hand production methods to machines, new chemical manufacturing and iron production processes significantly improved the efficiency of water power, the increased use of steam power, and the development of machine tools. This transition also included the use of biofuels and coal from wood. The first stage in the Industrial Revolution was in the textiles industry. Railroads, steam and steel were next, the third phase was electricity and chemicals, and the fourth was digital information technologies. This all started in Great Britain, although within a few decades it spread to Western Europe and the United States. Some of the significant factors as to why the Industrial Revolution started were their high wages. This made them want to produce the machines to do the work. Britain had cheap energy, the competition with other countries, and supply and demand. Another significant part in the start of the Industrial Revolution was the Agrarian Revolution. This pushed families to the city because of enclosures, which was locking up of the land. Landlords were not allowing farmers to strip farm anymore, although this had many negative effects. For example, the increase in poverty, the initial increase in mortality rate, and the social dislocation. Because a large amount of people moved into the city to work in the factories, this led to the factories becoming more successful. Many historians ask the question of why it happened when it did, and why it happened where it did. And many of them had come to the conclusion that a few preconditions had to exist for the Industrial Revolution to occur. The first was a population with modern attitudes towards work. In order to have the combination of urban life and factory work that was required, you needed a population of people who were no longer tied to specific land-specific places. Without the changing in their attitudes, you couldn't find a group of people willing to move from the country to the city. Professor of History Jeremy Black said Britain was characterised by the free expression of new ideas. Literacy. A revolution change like this would also require people who could read and write. Widely available printed materials, particularly including those with technical diagrams. Although you needed literacy, simple literacy wouldn't enable the sharing of information and receptivity of it requires for an economic and industrial change. Technical advances needed many copies of mechanically copied technical texts and diagrams that were inexpensive. These available materials, which after 1850 high-speed printing made possible. This resulted in huge growth of amateur scientific engineering and other innovations. An easily commercial product needed by but also afforded by many people. Cotton was this product. It was used very little until technology was able to manufacture it cheaply. It turned out to be a product that was very desirable, not only at home but abroad too. Transportation and communication. Since no part of Britain is any more than 70 miles away from the sea, and even less from a navigable waterway, this made transportation and communication easy and cheap in the 18th century in Britain. Markets. For England and other countries in similar conditions, it was necessary for them to have access to local and international economies. The government had to subordinate its foreign policy to economic ends. Now, what was it about Britain? There were many natural resources. Coal and water power provided energy for machines and their many factories. For making buildings, tools and machines, iron was used. Their favourable geography. Britain served over 6,000 merchant ships out of its harbours and increased overseas trade, which enabled Britain with raw materials and other markets. A wealthy class of ship owners came out of this trade, which resulted in further industrial growth with their profits. Beneficial climate for new ideas. Scientific and technical knowledge began being applied to business to produce industry in Britain. Clubs were formed for the exchange of ideas and inventions because many people were interested in studying in Britain. Advanced banking system. It was known that Britain had the most advanced and highly developed banking system in Europe. They were well known for giving out loans. This encouraged business people to invest in industry because of the rational interest rates. Political stability. Because the wars that Britain were involved in were fought in foreign soil, Britain's experience was very peaceful. They had a stable rule of law, and monarchs and aristocrats were less likely to impose taxes and seize earnings. This enabled the people to gain more wealth and power than other Europeans. Now, coal had a significant part into the reason as to why the revolution started in Britain. Britain were very lucky to have large amounts of coal that could be easily mined. Coal was the fuel that kick-started the revolution. Before, coal would have been the main source of energy, but because the population growth more was needed, forests were becoming further and further away from the towns and timber was very difficult to transport. This led to it becoming very expensive. Apart from the fact that coal was less expensive, it was also much more powerful. It could provide 3 times the amount of energy timber could. Britain also had an advantage over the other countries as their mines were near the water. This meant it was easily transportable, thus less expensive. Although this did have a problem, because it was in such demand, this meant the mines got deeper and deeper, and as they were so close to the water, there was a serious risk of flooding. They had to find a way to pump the water out of the mines. Firstly, horse-drawn pumps were used, but this method could only draw water from up to 90 feet deep. This limited the amount of coal that could be mined. Making a profit was the idea that was pushing the revolution forward, and many men were motivated to solve the problem. But Thomas Newcomen was the man who invented the first commercially successful steam engine. It did the work of 20 horses and pumped water from hundreds of feet below. This made deep mines economically viable. As time went on, more and more tried to invent newer and better technologies so they could get more profit out of the field of work they were in. R.C. Allen wrote The Industrial Revolution, why the Industrial Revolution was British, commerce, induced invention, and the scientific revolution. And he seemed to have the opinion that it had a lot to do with Britain's high wages. And this is a passage from his writings. Britain had a unique wage and price structure in the 18th century, and that structure is the key to explaining the inventions of the Industrial Revolution. British wages were higher by international standards, and energy was very cheap. The configuration led British firms to invent technologies that subsidized capital and energy for labour. High wages also increased the supply of technology by enabling British people to acquire education and training. Britain's wage and price structure was the result of the country's success in international trade, and that owed much mercantilism and imperialism when technology was first invented. It was also profitable to use in Britain, but eventually it was improved enough that it became cost-effective abroad. When the tipping point occurred, foreign countries adopted the technologies in its most advanced form. In conclusion, I believe the reason the Industrial Revolution started in Britain was due to many different factors. Firstly, the people. Without the modern attitudes and the drive to improve production, no one would have bothered to start these factories and to live a different way. Secondly, Britain's resources, mainly coal. Without this, they wouldn't have been able to run these machines, and without coal, new inventions wouldn't have been made to mine it. And thirdly, the Agrarian Revolution. Without this, many people would not have moved to the city, and the Industrial Revolution would have not been a success. All in all, we have a lot to thank. We have Britain to thank for a lot of things we take for granted now. I wonder what it'd be like if, say, China were the cradle of the Industrial Revolution. Would things be any different? Thank you.